This episode offers a behind the scenes look at one of the ways that my new book, What's Your Heaven, divinely came together. I interview my husband, Christian Hageseth, who is part of the original inspiration behind it. In our conversation, he shares more about the personal experiences he was having that ran parallel to the concepts that I had already started playing around with for the book. His stories are a powerful testament to the lessons and messages in the book and share the miracles and validations that can happen when we show up and do the work. Why we're here today is that I'm very excited that you agreed to be on the behind the scenes because
Mm-hmm.
this book, as all my books, was divinely inspired. You know me. I never write
Mm-hmm.
anything or do anything unless spirit calls.
Right.
And it's been several years since I wrote a book because, I was going through a learning curve, and it was during the time of COVID. And I was marathon reading. I mean, 30, 40 readings a week, every week for 2+ years,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all we could do. And I got the opportunity to connect with so many people. And
Right.
for me, what was going on was that, we're forced into a universal timeout, all of us.
Mm.
And it forced us or allowed us to take a step back from our lives and reevaluate our lives, right? And I was working with client after client, and they were at crossroads, pivotal crossroads in their life, desperately seeking guidance and answers to the why behind their struggle. Everyone seemed to be struggling with something, feeling stuck, feeling unfulfilled, but a lot of endings, a lot of quote unquote deaths, some
Mm-hmm.
literal and some metaphorical, a death of, a period of their life or a relationship or whatever it was. And what was coming through my readings, my guides, the last 4 years started revealing soul contracts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that we all come in with a loose blueprint or a script on the lessons we need to learn in this lifetime. So we call the soul contract or soul plan. And these events were prearranged before we're born. And so we go into the Akashic records and we're able to take a sneak peek into that client's situation. And so the bottom line is it shed new light and perspective, and it took the client out of victim, like this is happening to me, to empowerment. Like this, I signed up for this. I chose this and it's happening for me for my soul's growth and evolution. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was what I was going through. And then simultaneously, you can share where you were at in your experience with your dad, and then I'll share how that kind of all came together.
Yeah. You know, similarly, I think because of COVID, what came up, I remember, reaching out to my family. My parents have been divorced for, I'm 54. They've been divorced for, 42 years. I mean, so, the getting my parents together is not like, we're not reconciling. I think we're just getting back together as a family of origin and just trying to work on stuff, and it kind of came to a point I was like, look, I'd rather do this with you guys, while we still can, than, die with resentments or live with things that are unsaid. And so early in the pandemic, remember, I got together I invited my mom and my dad and my brother, and we
Yeah.
meet at a park because it was the pandemic, and so you can't go indoors anywhere. We take chairs and just go sit in the middle of a park somewhere and talk for a little bit. But talk about not just the light stuff, but the meaningful life stuff of the challenges that we face that are tied up in our family story, and tried to reconcile some things for individuals and for the family as a whole, and do that. And so I had started that process somewhat independently of this work that you started doing around what would turn into this book. So
Mhm.
that's a bit where I was at
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah,
You
that's exactly. And so it was in real time, I'm doing this one by one and you're going through it personally. And
Mhm.
a little backstory here is that, okay, so my dad died by suicide. And for those listeners who aren't familiar with my story, and this was 16 plus years ago, and he has come to me many, many times, along with thousands of spirits, expressing their regrets and frustrations over what they wish they would have known then, what they know now.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
is, we pick up in death where we left off in life. So all of it follows us. And so we want to clean up our karmic baggage right before now while we still have the
Hmm.
chance.
Right.
And I have felt for years my dad behind the inspiration for you to want to heal,
Hmm.
the relationships with your parents and in particular with your dad, because I know my
Hmm.
dad secretly wishes he had that opportunity with his kids.
Right. Well, I think it was sort of again, it's only through our life together that I came to this realization. And it's really through talking to you about what's going on with you and your work, that it was that idea of, hey, this is what I'm trying to heal with my family right now is more than just, this lifetime's issue. It is the karmic baggage, as you put it. And I started to look at it that way. And again, you were really going deep on a lot of things. One of which was, soul contracts, and it started to resonate, and it's like, my my dad and my brother and I were sort of stuck in these inextricably, dynamically opposed positions that were sort of beyond this life. They were karmic in that sense. And so it was with talking to you that I'm like, hey, let's I'm going to approach my dad with this, because again, it's sort of the same idea of trying to heal the family unit, before while we still can in this lifetime. And so I approached my dad and really depersonalized it with the whole soul contract aspect of this. And it wasn't a conversation about like, hey dad, you did this. And there was no accusation to it. There was, hey, you might have a soul contract in this life, that to be, challenged by these things. And the things I laid out, he agreed. He's like, yeah, I've really been challenged by those things. Those do feel like my challenges in this lifetime.
Mhm.
And then that made it, he became the observer in that. He was observing a lifetime he's having where he's being challenged by these particular things. And it's not him being defensive of it, but rather he was able to then start to embrace it and look beyond it and say, and really say, well, you're right. Like, what do I need to do to clean this up before I move on? And I give you a ton of credit for this. I think at one point you had told them the same thing. You said, hey, look, like whatever you don't clean up in this lifetime, you're going to have to fix. And if you really screw it up, you might get 5 more lifetimes of this, or to some degree. You said that.
That
And so
will come up.
my
Yeah.
dad said this very real fear of like, I need to clean shit up in this lifetime because I don't want to have to do all of these painful things again.
Yeah.
And so he was very responsive to
Was.
that. And he depersonalized it, when he looked at it as a soul contract, and that he was fulfilling and learning lessons, lessons in this lifetime, or, amongst many that would learn in multiple lifetimes. He depersonalized it and was able to come from a much better place to try to reconcile some of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, which is amazing.
Hmm.
Well, can I just say, so I don't forget, I love how much you believe in what I tell you. And I haven't always had that. And it means so much that you truly listen and you honor whatever wisdom or guidance comes through me and
Hmm.
you act on it, which
Yeah.
is so amazing. So I love it.
So
Okay.
I'll tell you this,
Yeah.
and maybe it's more for anyone that might be listening to this. So, before I was your boyfriend or your husband, I was a follower. I read your books.
True.
I read the books that were available at the times. I had attended. You had some private classes at Colorado Free University on developing your intuition that I went to. We had studied Kabbalah together, and so we had done a bunch of stuff. So that before I was romantically involved with you, I was already very intellectually and spiritually engaged with your work, And so
Mhm.
you've always been that to me. That was who you were first, and then
Right.
second, you were my girlfriend. But,
I love it. Well, it was
yeah.
very organic and yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about, so after you started having these like get-togethers to be the glue to heal the karma with your family, you and I had this idea. Let's come up with a list that we create. It's like having a life review before you die and have to do your real life review. And the list was a combination of, well, mainly the ongoing messages, regrets, frustrations, epiphanies the spirits have after they pass away and reflect, and they wish they would have had the chance to do a deep dive into these questions, whether it was with themselves, with others, or with source, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I came up with this list together based on what I know in my professional experience, but your personal hands-on experience with everything going on with your family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you had this brilliant idea. I'm going to go sit down with my dad and do this list and record it so that this is priceless information. And one day he's not going to be here. One
Yeah.
day we're all not going to be here. And so it records and documents the growth, because we're all here in Earth School. We all have lessons. There's no shame in that. In fact, we want lessons, because if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity. And so it was very profound. And your dad said to you, wow, you really need to get this work out into the world, having no idea you and I had talked about, I should write a book on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really profound. And then do you remember you had that very cathartic drive back from Fort Collins, and you were so emotional, and you came home and you're like, I have to tell you, you have to write a book. You have to get this out there. And here's my experience and what happened with my dad. Do you remember this?
I know. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happened next? Tell the story about the Dob kit.
The DOP kit?
Okay, I'll tell the story. So, okay, earlier that day, I had a meditation, and my dad came to me, and I didn't tell you this. And he said he was so proud of you for making the effort to go and work through your karma with your dad and heal. And that my dad was saying, Becky, you need to write this book. I didn't tell you that. And I said, got it, Dad. Yes, I'm proud of him too. And yes, I will entertain the idea. Okay. Fast forward 8-10 hours later, you come home on a high saying, wow, the questions were profound, very meaningful, deeply touched both of us, and you need to write this book. Okay.
Yeah.
You're distracted. You had just been traveling. And so your Dob kit with all your toiletries was in the bathroom, and you're half in the bathroom. I'm sitting on the bed in the bedroom. And all of a sudden you open your Dob kit, and a dime, which is my dad's main sign. Do you remember this? Fell on the tile. And you accused me of planting it. You're like, did you plant that dime?
Right. It's so obvious. It's like, come on. So obvious.
No,
You're going to put it there?
No, I did not plant this dime. Okay, so we're like, got it. An hour later, I'm like in disbelief. I'm like, Chris, my dad came to me this morning in a meditation, and that's his icing on the cake saying, write this book. An hour later, as I'm getting in bed, there's a dime on the ground. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So amazing work, Dad. He drove home his point. Okay. So then the next day, I called my literary agent, Efat, and my writer, Samantha, and I said, we have the book. Because we had been playing for a year on the book to write, and it was the abundance book, and it was manifesting, and none of it felt right.
Right. Right.
This was,
it was an interesting crossroads of you preparing for this and sort of what I was going through. But I think that, those series of questions became a really powerful, inflection point of those two, where it was the manifestation of a lot of that work of the concepts that you were toying with. It was a manifestation of how to make that meaningful right now in my life, and, in the life of my dad. And it's like, well, wait a second, let's, instead of if it is, if there are soul contracts in this lifetime, what are your lessons, right? And then how did you react to those? And, what do you wish you did differently? Because that was a lot of what, my dad and I were working through. And so by taking that, he was able to really approach his challenges in life, not as his challenges, but rather the life lessons that he was given in this life.
right.
It was huge. It was so powerful. I think it was transformative for him as well in the asking of the questions, because after you and I formulated the 20 or 21 questions, I sent them to him. I emailed them to him and I said, hey, I want to, when we sit down, I'm going to video record this, but here's the questions I want to go over, and so he had a chance to like sit with them and prep. And, it's kind of a series in there where, it frames it as this sort of, multiple lifetime spiritual quest of soul contracts and, which lifetime are you on now and what lessons do you have to learn in this lifetime and are you learning them? And then it really gets into this lifetime, what are you most proud of in this lifetime? What do you regret the most in this lifetime?
Right.
And so by the time you get to that really powerful question of, what is the thing that you regret the most in your lifetime? That's a really hard thing for most people to answer with honesty, because that thing that you regret the most, you're probably pretty ashamed of. Mm-hmm. And or maybe you're defensive about, or, you have it wrapped up in a way that you're not going to be willing to articulate it. And when he got, I think when we were going through this process, my dad got to these really tough personal questions about this lifetime, and he was able to answer with a lot of humility and insight into his own life and a willingness to be vulnerable with what the answers were. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very powerful setup to disarm people from I think the natural protections that life gives us,
right.
Like it's really hard to talk about, anyone take 5 minutes and tell me the thing you screwed up the most in life. Okay. It's like, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to go there.
Really hard,
yeah.
and this brings about that a safe place to do it mm-hmm. in a way that makes you still feel like, you're a good soul living a good life, even though you make some mistakes.
Well, and the whole basis that, of this is that we're in Earth School. It's you learn by trial and error. You learn through relationships with others, part of your soul group.
Well, so I think that's such an important part of your message, though, is that this is Earth School, that it's not Earth test final, right. Because most people don't feel okay to fail. Right. In school, like you take a test, you get a couple answers wrong. That's okay. You take, you get to go study and take the test again and, learn. Mm-hmm. Right. Where so much of life just feels like a final judgment. Right. If you knew the idea was just to learn and be better, it feels a lot safer than like you have to get it right.
Exactly. It's more exactly, it's intention. And if your intention mm-hmm. is sincere to, you screw up, so, okay, you learn. So you do and be better. I talk about in the book. So you make a mistake, fine. Just don't make the same mistake twice. Make new mistakes. I quote you. You're welcome.
Well, yeah, I get a nickel every time you say that. Don't make the same mistakes twice. Make new mistakes.
That's right. But that is the whole point. And when we cross over, nobody judges us. We judge ourselves. We play judge and jury. Mm-hmm. We have a group of guides, council members that help us take an honest inventory. And so in this book, what I did is I sprinkled these questions throughout in different chapters for people to reflect on. And again, the book goes back to relationship with self, relationship with others, but most importantly, relationship with source. Because at the end of the day, it's always between you and the divine, or you and God.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have an opportunity to go through this list or life review. And then in the back, you had this brilliant idea, like put in the appendix, the whole list, so that if you want to buy a copy for your friend and go sit down that you have always struggled with, or your neighbor or your parent or child, you can do what you just did in whatever format you want to do it, to do the work now and not put it off until you die.
Like for my dad, I did it because my dad is, 80 years old now, 81, and has had Parkinson's disease for 16 years. And, end of life is nearer now to him than it ever has been. And those days are limited. But I think the way these questions are written, and you and I have talked a lot about this, they could be slightly tuned for all sorts of endings. Right. This could be, somebody had a 20-year career and they're moving on. You could do a review with this list of questions and just focus it on what did that career mean to you? What was the biggest mistake you made in this career?
Exactly.
What lessons did you learn and not learn? And then you can take that with you as a way of processing some closure around these major life events. End of a career, end of a marriage, loss of a loved one, not just the ending of one's own life.
Exactly. They can be used alone in doing your own self-inquiry. They can be used with others. They could be used in a family like you did, an intervention family format. But I guess the most important thing is that this is what the spirits tell me we end up doing, regardless if we want to or not, when we cross over. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we've done our homework here now, we go home with brownie points. We get ahead of it. And the whole idea of the book is What's Your Heaven is how do you resolve the unresolved issues and stop repeating the same patterns and get unstuck? And how do you choose to do and be better so that you can bring heaven to earth now? Experience, and heaven is a feeling. It's not a place. It's a feeling. It's a state of mind. Heaven or hell, state of mind. So
I'll tell you also, I think in your book, that whole change of how do you change, Ian, the CRT, I have already found to be just a very powerful tool. It's another arrow in your quiver, so to speak. It's another tool a person can use to actually affect that change. How do you change the way you feel about something? That's very hard to say, or do, but you have a tool there.
So for those who aren't familiar, the CRT is a program in the book. It's called Change It, Run It, Tap It. And it's, there's all sorts of tools in our toolbox on a mind, body, spirit level. But these are the 3 tools that I've been using for the last several years. Personally, you're now my guinea pig using it. And Spirit said, bring this to everyone. It's simple. You can do it for 5 minutes in the morning and you've done your homework for the day. But Change It, Run It, Tap It truly is change the false beliefs, the old, rewrite the narrative, whatever story you're telling yourself, illusion, delusion, that's keeping you stuck in a disempowered state, you reframe it to the positive, like I am, whatever that is. And then the run it is running energy, it's color, it's frequency, which I go in depth talking about. And the tapping is emotional freedom technique. It's just it's a format of tapping to reset your nervous system, to integrate the positive suggestions and affirmations into your body. So,
right. Well, and again, for people that don't know, Rebecca is the real deal in that she walks her walk, for even when she's not writing a book every day, she's listening to a podcast. She's thinking about these things. She's focused on these things. She's trying new techniques offered by others, and then this especially tapping has really become something that you integrated over the last several years into your practice. And so here you are, an advanced but very open being, and always looking for these other new ways of incorporating, new wisdom into, a better life. And I think you really found it, with CRT. And again, I'm the guinea pig, and I have to say this is better than my last guinea pig job, because I used to attach electrodes to my head and see if that worked. And so this is much less painful.
Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah. I've been upgraded. But the being a guinea pig in this is great because, I sit there and I watched you do it and seeing your success. And also, to be candid, we have a daughter. And our daughter loves to do tapping at night, because mom has put her to sleep and taught her tapping, and she loves it, And so I get to sit here and see it work for you, and then work for her. And then I started to use it with some things. I found it to be a very a meaningful tool to, sometimes when you meditate or you're trying to think about some of these things, they're kind of highfalutin, big, nebulous ideas that are hard to define and almost impossible to do anything with. To really how do you make your integrity better? What do you it's a concept, right? It's not an activity. And so, but this has created that sort of repetitive activity that has a very broad application, and I've been using it for a couple of issues now, and I found this great results. So I think that CRT is in your book again is going to be an amazing tool that some people will choose to apply, and it's going to be of great benefit.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. It's about doing the work. There's no magic pill, as my dad used to love to remind me. No magic pill. We wish there was. There isn't. It's Earth School. There's homework. Be glad you have homework. That's why you're still here. There's gifts in the challenges. Life is supposed to be messy, but there's a way moving forward that we can learn our lessons through greater grace, ease, and joy, and less pain and struggle. And
the first of those you go into this book too is like, you have to accept that like the challenges of your life are happening for you, not to you.
Right.
That the challenges that you feel in this lifetime, if it's around, body image and self-love, or if it's around, getting sustenance or starvation, are challenges that were given to you unique in this lifetime for you to try to overcome the best you can.
Right.
And to see that as that, and so to take the victimhood for all of us out of the bad stuff that happens, because like Gandhi, like Buddha said, life is suffering. I literally know nobody in this world, rich or poor, man or woman, young or old, that has no suffering. Everybody identifies some form of suffering in their life. There's no one without it. And so the question is, what do you do with it? So this whole, the concept of the soul contract is embrace your suffering for the uniqueness that it brings into this lifetime, and become a better person because of it.
Exactly. Beautifully said. Yeah. Asking yourself, what is this here to teach me? And it does take you out of victim, because victim is the lowest vibration on the scale of consciousness. And the whole idea is to evolve up this scale into that place of knowing or enlightenment. Yeah. So I have to share this. I don't want to forget, but okay. The proof that what your efforts are, what you've done with your family is working. When your dad reached out the other day and initiated, let's spend some quality time together. Can we come down and have brunch and just be together? Right. And so we made that a priority, and we had a lovely morning. And then you and I, we had to leave to go pick up our daughter. And I knew my dad was present. I felt him. My brother and I had been texting that morning on, doesn't this look like dad? And it's my brother's new boss. And we're like, wow, that's kind of creepy. It looks just like dad. So we're talking about my dad, and I'm thinking, my dad is so proud of you, Chris, that you are really walking your talk and making the effort. And look, it's paid off, because now your dad is receptive and wants to be closer. Okay. And then what happened? As we're driving, and we took a random drive to get her, a random way, the license plate, Shelly, the license plate.
Amazing. That was amazing.
It was amazing. I'm like, I was speechless for a few hours. I've never seen a license plate, Shelly.
And we were so far, I'm going to call it, out of our way. Like the way we ended up getting there was this very it was the faster route apparently, but not the shorter, that's for sure. And we were way out there, and I'm like, what are the chances?
Like, why are we here? Well, and this poor lady who's driving the car. So by the way, Shelly was my father's name, for anybody who doesn't know. That was my
Shelly's also some lady that we cut off on the road like 3 times trying to take a picture of this license plate.
And she even, when we were slowing down to get her to pass us to take it, and she's looking at us like, what the hell?
Like, what are these people doing?
That's funny.
Yeah, that's funny.
It was so amazing. It was the icing on the cake for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, well, I appreciate you sharing, because you are truly the initial inspiration behind all of this, along with my guides. So thank you.
I feel really lucky to share a life with you, because I think a lot of my activity, the things that I end up saying or doing or suggesting, sometimes feel like I'm just a pawn. I'm being used as a tool to voice something that's from greater than me from source. And I think a lot of, there are aspects of what we're talking about with this book that's true as well. And so I'm just grateful to be close to you and to be a speaker for Source and have a small role in this. But the work is awesome. The book is amazing. I think it's really I believe, of your 4 books, this is definitely the most powerful. It's a real culmination of everything, all the work you've done. It's an original work with, very, very meaty, very meaningful, very approachable. So I love it. I just love being close to you and witnessing this process, and
well, I feel equally as grateful and blessed. And as we know, Spirit uses other people as our messengers, and we do that for each other. So
yeah,
it's an amazing thing.
I've always felt like, as I'm sitting here right now, there's no noise around me. But if I was a radio and I could turn that radio on and turn up the volume, I could tune into a rock and roll station, or I could tune into a country and Western station or a talk radio station. And so the energy of all of the stuff that I could hear is around me, but I'm not a radio, and I've always felt that about living my life with you is, you are truly a receiver, like that radio is for radio waves, for, the communication with Spirit. And it's just very awesome, really, to live in that presence and to know that, constantly be reaffirmed that you're picking up essentially these radio waves, these, the thoughts of Source from the other, of Spirit from the other side. And they are available to us. And you're the sort of the proof of that, and that if the radio station can play the music, it proves that the radio waves are there. Yeah. And for you to do your work proves that that communication is there from the other side. And so I just love it. You are a powerful reminder to me every day of what a miracle the world we live in is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would say I disagree in that we are all radios. Some of us have antennas and some of us have satellites. And some of us have a lot of static on the line. So it's hard. So we all have a connection. But like you're saying, to your point, it's not what you were born to do. And you have to work harder at it. But you can, as you are doing now with your spiritual practice, a prayer and meditation, clear the static, raise up that antenna a little bit more and connect.
Yeah. I'm very open to my own perceived, my intuitive abilities, but they're very, I also I'm humbled about it. I'm realistic about it. They're very humble compared to yours, like I'm excited if kind of after the fact, I'm like, oh, there was a lot of flow in that. And some things just kind of came out, they feel kind of special, but where yours is intentional and like you're having a clear conversation with somebody, and it's just I agree. I have intuition that I have more intuition now from having been near you and with you than I would have had otherwise. But we're measuring on completely different scale.
Well, you got to keep up to speed with me, so you're doing a good job pacing to the degree that's perfect and right for you.
Thank you. I have other strengths that help me keep up with you. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
There is no question. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for being so brave to share not only today, but in this book. It's going to touch a lot of lives. I know a lot of people can relate, and it's pretty amazing.
In particular, again, kind of going back to it, I really hope that that people do pick up on this idea of having this exit interview with loved ones before they become departed loved ones. Because the exit interview I did with my dad, the questions that are in your book, I mean, man, it was honestly, it was a fun conversation to have with my dad. It was a meaningful time to hang out together. I recorded the video. I shared it with him. He and I have talked about it a couple of times. It's one of these easy, free, available things that we can do that make my life and my dad's life and our relationship together better. And I hope that other people benefit from that as well.
Amen. Amen. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Small Medium at Large. For more information about my offerings and events, and for additional resources on your spiritual journey, including my self-guided courses, books, and blog videos, please visit my website, RebeccaRosen.com. You can also follow me on social media by searching @Medium Rebecca Rosen on Facebook and Instagram. As always, wishing you brightest blessings and all love.